Be sure to hop on over to the Spiritual Broadcast Network. It's the go-to place for all things spiritual. You'll discover internet television shows that you won't find anywhere else. You can also choose from hundreds of hours of spiritual documentaries and movies. You'll enjoy on-demand and live internet television programming 24/7. Best of all, we add new dramas, comedies, talk, and reality shows and more on a daily basis. So why spend countless hours searching the web when you can quickly find just what you want on the Spiritual Broadcast Network? Good afternoon. Welcome to the Ed King Show, or Afternoons with Ed. Here's your host, Ed King.
Good afternoon. It's great to be back with you. It's been several weeks since we've done a show, and I miss doing it, although I always come over here with some trepidation as how am I going to talk for 30 minutes? Who wants to listen to my stuff for 30 minutes? So anyway, George asked me when I came in the studio this afternoon, he said, how was your week? And I said, well, I'll just talk about today. Today has been wonderful. Started out, my wife decided that of all things she wanted a new fancy faucet for our kitchen sink. And so we went and bought her the faucet, and I asked a friend of mine the other day if I know he does some handyman work. I said, do you do any plumbing? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I got this thing to be installed. And he said, okay. So he came over and checked it out and said, yeah, I can do the job. And he came over this morning and he did the job. And it was not a real simple one. He had lay on his back with his head up, upside down under the sink. And so he gets through, and I said, okay, John, I said, how much owe you? No, he said, nothing, Merry Christmas. I said, well, listen, how about a token payment or something? No. I said, okay, you're vegan. I'll take you out to a big vegan dinner someplace. No, he said, next time we meet at Denise, he said, you can buy me my lunch. I said, oh. So that put me in a pretty good mood. Then I got an unexplained bill just before I come up here, and I think I know what it is now, but at first I was real upset with it. I think it was my AAA membership that it came in my wife's name. That's what I couldn't figure out, because why it should be in her name, and because both of us have AAA membership. I want to talk about a number of things. I think I look better with glasses, and yeah, I do. I think so. I'm going to talk about a number of things today, and I got some handy dandy notes here, and it's going to be skipping around, and I may skip back and forth. One of the things I've been thinking about is, well, I watched the program, and the guy, psychologist, and I may have talked about this before because it's not just fresh in my mind, but this psychologist, this MD that has a zillion letters after his name, he was talking about the fact that we need to keep doing something after we retire. We need to have an avocation, not a hobby, not playing golf, not playing bridge, but something that actually have to do. The only way outlet I have is at this present time, because I'm not disabled, but I'm not as hale and hearty as a lot of people. And so I do some volunteer work, and of course I do this program once a week, and I really enjoy this because it helps activate my mind. I have to think about something that I think possibly be interest to other people. So one of the things that has something to do with this, but not totally, is that one of the problems that I see myself doing, and I see it in other people, and I'm trying to not only cure myself of it, but by show example and talk about it a little bit, is that our minds always wants to go to some adverse thing, not positive but negative. For example, there's and I this goes through my mind too. A guy will tell me a story about how somebody did him over, and whether it's a bank or a company or client or whatever, and then immediately I want to say, oh yeah, and this happened to me. And down here in the banking business, you have some weird stories to tell, but I don't tell them anymore because they're negative. And I try to keep myself out of a negative mood and into the positive mood. I'm not Dale Carnegie or anybody like that. But I just think that I think it's the biggest improvement that I've done over the past year is to recognize that fact and to deal with it. One of the things that's kind of interesting too, and I think somewhat relative to this, is I'm not adverse to asking for advice, but I gotta evaluate that the person tells me, and accept it. Now I'm like everybody else. We get lots and lots of free advice, and that's worth exactly what we pay for it. And there's a fellow that I encounter frequently, and I don't care what subject that anybody mentions, not just me, but he has to top that. As you all know, I talked about having an addiction to alcohol, and I was talking about the fact that people tell me that they went through college stoned or drunk or both, or worked, were functional in their work. Well, I don't buy that because I could never do that. I could not work. I could not study. I couldn't do anything like that if I had been imbibing alcohol. So this has come up again the other night to talk to this guy, and I happened to mention something about college, and we were talking about that subject, and we were talking about, and I said, on Friday night we'd go out and have a few beers on Friday night after, we kind of reserved it, having gone to school all week and so forth, and this guy right away he pipes up about his adventures in college. He said he went to college, but he got A-. He got A-. Now, how you get A- on all your subjects, I don't know, but I guess see, I'm getting negative here. I'm criticizing somebody else. So let's scratch that subject. I just want to point out how easy it is to get into negativity, and I have to watch myself. I'm very selective when I watch television, and I watch a lot of. I don't watch a lot of the shows, but I pick out some of the shows and don't tape them. You DVD. You don't even DVD them anymore. You put them on whatever you do on your television. And so I'm going to call it taping them. And so I tape some of the classic movies and watch them, and they're it's very interesting. And I talked about that once before about Jackie Coogan and so forth. But I also watch the History Channel, and I'm able to skip through their commercials, fast forward through their commercials, and I watch a lot of PBS. I find these educational. And so some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today is stuff that I was reminded of or became encountered is some of the stuff that I've watched recently on the History Channel, for example. One of the things I was talking about, one of the things I was watching was a program on History Channel, and it was titled "The Men Who Made America." And they're talking about these big wigs like Andrew Carnegie and Henry Ford, John D. Rockefeller. And because I want to mention this one thing, I think it's later in my notes, but I want to mention this one thing. These guys were robber barons. They were not the nicest people in the world. Carnegie apparently was a little more soft-hearted, so he hired a guy by the name of Frick to run his steel business. But the interesting thing is that all of these people did contribute something to our advancement as a society, despite themselves. Rockefeller with the oil, a man, he was a terrible, terrible individual. I've read his biography, and the things he did to his competitors is just horrendous. Carnegie was a very interesting man to me because he was an uneducated young boy that came over here from Scotland with a very heavy accent, a burr they call it in Scotland, or when you're talking about the way that people from Scotland talk. And he came over and he worked for a fellow, I'm trying to think of his name, he owned the Pennsylvania Railroad anyway. And this guy kind of took a shine to him, took him under his wing, and he ended up at a very young age running the Pennsylvania Railroad. And how he got into the steel business is kind of different, because they had no way of getting across the Mississippi River, and there was no bridge construction available that they could put across the Mississippi River and not obstruct the steamboat traffic or any of the other traffic on the river. So he conceived the idea of constructing this with steel. Now, this was kind of unheard of because, and I didn't know this, but the steel was like a precious metal because it was so hard to refine. And they didn't have a good refining method. Excuse me. And so he decided he was going to build this bridge with steel. So that led him into getting into the steel business. There was a man by the name of Bessemer that did the thing that made possible to do it in a more rapid manner, but nobody had a plant to do it, and Carnegie built a plant to do it. And people were so trepidatious about this bridge that he built over the Mississippi, and he had a terrible time because he almost went completely broke. He got some backing somewhere. But he put it across the bridge, and they had this superstition at the time that an elephant wouldn't walk across on an unsafe structure. So he gets an elephant and has a parade, and the elephant leads the parade over the Mississippi River on this bridge he built. So the chief thing in the steel industry then was, of course, railroad tracks. But then it blossomed into the only reason we can have tall buildings as we have now is steel structure. And of course, he was able to manufacture. Now they don't talk about they don't talk too much about it in this, but there's a bad history in the steel industry of abusing labor. And when Carnegie hired Frick, because Frick's name, Frick was really a rotten individual. He had been in the coal business, and of course we all know how the coal miners were treated. And he decided that his steel workers, now steel working is a very, very nasty job. It's very hazardous. And he had these men working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And if you think about it, if a guy working in the office and he's working these long hours, he's able to fall asleep at his desk. You don't fall asleep in the steel mill because you do, you're dead. And this led to some horrendous strikes, and they called in the Pinkertons, and the Pinkertons shot down innocent people. Really only 9, but you would get the impression it was more when they talked about it. But it was a boon to the American economy because now we can. You can't build a tall building over, I don't know, 4 or 5 stories, I guess, because you have to keep making the walls thinner as you go up and have to have a real wide base or else it tumbles down. But today, of course, as I think everybody knows this, you make this steel structure and then you just put brick or limestone or cement blocks or whatever on the outside, and or glass, which doesn't seem to me to work out all that well. We're talking about the Twin Towers disaster, which is something else I'm going to talk about. I don't know if I'm going to talk about that next. Yeah. Henry Ford also, was not the nicest guy in the world, and he was the last automotive manufacturer to oppose unionization of his plants. He was once renowned for paying this exorbitant wage of $5 a day. That is not entirely true. He would hire these people at $2 or $3 an hour a day, and if they stayed, I think, 5 years, they would possibly get up to $5 a day. Now, that doesn't sound like very much money in today's economy, where we've had so much inflation over the last 100 years or more. It's amazing. When you read Dickens, and Mr. Micawber says in David Copperfield, and he gives David Copperfield this good advice, and he says, Copperfield, he says, I want to give you some good advice. That's a terrible imitation of him, but it's fine. And that's one thing I can do is laugh at myself. But he says, income, 100 pounds, expenditures, 98.5. He says, result, happiness. Income, 100 pounds, expenditures, 105 pounds. Disaster. Now, that's true. It's true. It was good advice he gave Copperfield. He never kept his own advice. And if you talk about digression, that was a dandy there, and I liked it. I hope you did too. I talked about these people. The steel was only used to make cookie or knives and forks and jewelry. It was that expensive. Carnegie, as you know, endowed after he made all these billions of dollars. He gave it a start. He apparently had a guilty conscience about it, and he started giving the money away. Carnegie Hall, the big concert hall in New York, and a famous place, is he donated that, built that at his expense. He, I'll say, I forget how many hundreds of libraries throughout the country that he built and stocked with books. I know that when I was a child, a young man, I used to go to Carnegie libraries. There were Carnegie libraries, and actually, when I lived in Cleveland in my high school years, I could walk to two of the Carnegie libraries. They were not widely scattered. They were all over the place. It's so the problem that Carnegie got into when all the conflict started with the union and everything. I think it was around 1882 or something like that. He went back over to Scotland and stayed there for extended period of time and let Frick run the business. And Frick is the guy that did the dirty work and called in the Pinkertons. There was this terrible thing that Carnegie wanted to be wealthier than Rockefeller, and I don't think he ever made it. One of the things that, going back to what I first said this morning about what happened this morning, I should say, reminded me, a guy that now I got to pass this big favor that this fellow did for me this morning. I got to pass that along. And it reminded me when I thought about that and made a note about it, about that movie, I think it Pass It Forward, which was a great movie with just a terrible, horrible ending that destroyed, in my mind, the movie. But where I do you a favor and you in turn do somebody else a favor. And I think if we have this mindset, I mentioned before that I don't think anybody would hire me. I couldn't work extended periods of time or stand on my feet extended periods of time. But I do I do some volunteer work, and I volunteer at a food pantry twice a week. I go down there on Thursday, and the stuff comes in from the food bank, and we check the dates on it, make sure that it's still edible. The canned goods and everything is checked, and we just check that, and then we stock the shelves and the freezer and refrigerator and so forth. And then on Friday, I go down there and I give it to, go out to people. And it's all a volunteer basis, of course, and it's something that I can do. Now, if anybody out there's got a job for me, they think you could hire a good salesman, or I could probably work a couple hours a day. I could sure use the money, I'll tell you, because you live too long, you run out of money. I told you about John and his Merry Christmas thing. I was watching something else that was, I think it was called The History of Mankind or something. And it took civilization through the ages and how we progressed from, kind of savagery and into something that's now resembles some sort of a civilization. We have made some things. We don't hang people for every little crime, and don't throw them in debtors' prisons and all that sort of thing. There was a lot of things that people were executed for minor crimes. But where was I going with that, friends? I was thinking about so much has been done, at this pointed out, so much has been done bad in the name of religion. Many wars have started. What the heck? Those crazy Islamic guys that were fanatics. They're not the average Islamic, but they came over here and bombed the towers in New York. But it's kind of interesting because the basic Christianity and Islam religion are so close together. And they're both sons of Abraham. We start out with a common ground, and then they fight over religion. So think about the Crusades. These people thought they could get away with anything. They were murdering civilians. They weren't just murdering, but these people were infidels, and they didn't believe the same way they did. So they just invaded their country and started killing them. And the Spanish Inquisition, unless you said that you admitted you were a Christian, off with your head. Bear with me a minute here. I think that I talked about us making progress. I think we have. We still do some barbaric things. We persist on, especially in Florida and Texas. And what does it tell you about these two states? We execute. We're still executing people in a rather wholesale manner, and they found that there's a percentage of these people turned out from DNA evidence that they were innocent the whole time. So we're taking the chance every time we kill one of these people. Now, some of these people that are on death row are horrible individuals. They're just goofy, and there's nothing you're going to do to change them. I think life imprisonment would be a much better penalty, because they have to suffer through those years as long as there was no parole imminent. I think something I read or saw was talking about the fact that we are probably the least adaptable to our environment than any of the species that are now around. And we, there are animals that are faster than us, and they exceed us in every way. We can't fly like a bird. And yet we've been able to, and I think that's because of our brain, and we're able to progress. In my lifetime, in this last century, I've seen remarkable changes. This is a computer age. It was unheard of not too many years ago. My parents, who were born in 1884 and 1885, they saw all kinds of things. Even the invention of the bicycle, radio, telephone, all sorts of things, fairly new. And we were going at a tremendous pace of this. Some of it not good, I think. I think we are too much that way. I saw another program I watched about, and I've talked about Lincoln before, but he's kind of my idol. Lincoln suffered from depression, terribly. They call it melancholy. And yet, here's a guy that we'd probably be two nations on this part of this continent that we call the United States if it wasn't for that man. I mean, he was ideally suited for the job. Amazing person, and I never can talk too much about him. Back to positive thinking. If you look around and see people who you think have a positive attitude or strike you as having a positive attitude, you can emulate them. But you can look around and you can see people with this negative attitude, and it's a bad example. And I expose myself sometimes to some people with bad attitudes who I'm presently trying to alter them a little bit by example and a little jab here and a little jab there. But I'm a realist. You can't really change other people, but you can kind of influence them sometimes, and I try to do that. One of the robber barons that I wanted to mention is J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was the patron saint of all these scam artists that we've encountered more recently, where people were taking money away. So I see by the clock, I think I have about one more minute, but I'm going to say I really enjoyed this afternoon. I hope you got something out of it. I hope I didn't preach too much, but I've had a good time, and I hope you enjoyed yourself too. I'll see you next week. Bye now.